What does the perfect chord for the end of the world sound like? Imagine a chord so emotionally powerful that it makes everything feel like there's just this deep sense of despair and hopelessness. We are talking about the famous Tristan chord from Wagner's opera Tristan and Isolde. If you don't know anything about Wagner, not exactly a good dude. So yeah, not a celebration of the guy himself, but the historical significance of this chord is just astounding. So much so that it set the tone for Lars von Trier's 2011 film, Melancholia. And if you've never seen this film and you want to see this film, well, spoilers ahead. Check out the introduction. Now, this is the opening to the film, and it looks and sounds like this. Wow, I mean, look at just this imagery here, in addition to what we're hearing, is absolutely just the sound of despair. It sounds completely hopeless. And the decision to use Wagner's work here, I think, is really, really important. And it brings up the importance of this one individual chord. Now, what is the chord we're talking about? The recording used in this film seems to be pitch shifted a little bit. So we are going to check out a recording by the Frankfurt Radio Symphony, and it sounds like this. Here's that same opening, just in the correct key. That chord right there, that is the Tristan chord. Now, that might seem like not much at first. It might be like, well, how did that chord possibly change the entire course of music history? Well, here's the thing. Here's what that chord is. There it is. That chord. That is the Tristan chord. Now, what is this? Just asking that question illuminates the reason why this was so impactful. It is November, and that means we are getting ready for another massive Black Friday event. If you want to know the details of the absolutely insane deal we're going to be running this year, and if you want to get some free lessons and sneak peeks from the bundle, click the link in the description or scan the QR code and go check it out. At the time when this was written in the mid-1800s, music was still heavily focused around what we might call tonality, which basically means that when we play a piece of music, it is in a key and there is a home bass. Let me give you an example of what that sounds like. Now this is, of course, Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of the most famous piano pieces of all time, but despite being written like 50 years later, Clair de Lune is still an example of tonality in harmony. We are playing in the key of D flat, and everything we do centers around D flat as our home base. We can change chords, we can go from place to place, but we're always going to come back to home base. And even throughout the entire piece, we can go places that maybe don't fit, like E doesn't necessarily fit in D flat major as a home base, right? But we're still just kind of touching on that. It doesn't bring us somewhere new entirely. We still are firmly rooted in D flat major. Now this exists in modern music as well. The entirety of New York State of Mind is in the key of B flat. Now we can go other places, but we always end up coming back to B flat. This exists in the vast majority of music we listen to. Well, Wagner did not do that with Tristan and Isolde. And it was perhaps one of the things it received the most criticism for, but one of the reasons why it had a massive impact on the direction of music. It was one of the first operas and compositions in general to leave tonality absolutely in the dust, and the very first representation we get of that is the first chord in the entire thing. That right there. Here's the thing. This is why this is so interesting, okay? This chord alone. Now, we're going to talk about the harmony as it moves forward, but even just this chord alone. What is this chord? Okay, is it an F chord? F minor 7 flat 5? Yeah, technically this chord is that. How else could we look at it? Could we look at it as a D flat chord maybe? like a D flat dominant, and we add the ninth, that could be, sure. But normally the way we would determine that is by looking at the surrounding context. Cool, so let's look at the surrounding context and see what we get. What? Huh. Well, that's interesting. That right there was it's an E7 chord, and our melody started on our sharp 11, and then moved up to the 5th, right? That is not the place that I expected us to go. There is absolutely no context in which an F half diminished chord would normally go to an E7 chord. How on earth could we make that work? And what information here is giving us any indication of where home base is? What key is this in? And now we get into the fundamental questions that make this such an impactful chord. And perhaps its lack of having a home base is part of what allows it to feel so just kind of hopeless. There's no connection to anything. It's kind of just floating in the middle of nowhere with some dissonance, some semblance of a minor sad sound. I mean, tell me, like, if you hear a minor chord, let's just play F minor. We usually think of minor as being dark, right? And sometimes we associate that with like sad, right? It doesn't always necessarily mean that, but that's a pretty common way we describe it. Minor is sad, major is happy, right? So without any other information, like we could say, okay, yeah, that's sure, that's a dark chord, right? But isn't it a whole lot darker when we go? Because there's now so many different aspects of the chord. When we play a minor chord, just a regular minor triad, there's only one note that's giving it that darkness, that's making it sound a little bit minor or sad, and that is the minor third. In the case of F, that's A flat. So we have this minor chord, but this, it's more than we have a tritone in here, right? We have one minor third, we have two minor thirds, and then we have a major third. We have all these different things going on that create this dissonance, but yet none of it gives us an indication of where we're headed. There's no indication of what key we're in, where home base is, what is the context of this, and furthermore, when we give it our next movement, we now just compound on that lack of a home base, a lack of direction, right? At first, I kind of thought like, oh, it has this feeling that's maybe somewhat similar to like a distorted 2/5 of some kind. But then when I figured out, okay, we're going to E7, then I was like, well, wait a second. That doesn't make any sense. Could that work? It could work. Well, maybe it's E flat minor. Maybe that's where we're going. Surely the next bit will tell us. Okay, let's listen. That's definitely not E flat minor. Okay, where are we now? We just have another one of these chords. Great. Now I really have no idea where we are. Same exact thing, right? We're just up a minor third from where we started. Okay, so we have minor third movements going on. We have absolutely no indication of where home base is, what is going on here. This is why this was such an impactful piece. Because I'm gonna give you a little spoiler here. This goes on for 4.5 hours without a resolution. We'll talk about that in just a second. But to go back to Melancholia, the way that this is utilized is just astounding. There's that second chord that doesn't tell us anything at all about where this is supposed to be. This is where we truly start to realize, oh no, there's going to be no relief in this entire thing. We're just gonna get curveball after curveball after curveball of this developing, flowing theme that tells us nothing about what we're supposed to expect next or what's happened, where we are, where's home base, none of it. And it just keeps going and going. This is a wild shot too, with the dual shadows coming on. That is fascinating. That's like, okay, here's a dominant chord. Starts on a flat 9, goes to a normal 9. Surely, this dominant chord is gonna resolve, right? That's what we expect. Here we go. Okay, never mind. No resolution there. Instead, we move up a half step and we have this really beautiful sharp 11 voicing in the melody that then resolves to an F major chord. Okay. And as we go through the entire 4.5 hours of Tristan and Isolde, we find that there are many major chords that might sound like a resolution, but you'll notice they immediately go somewhere else, and they usually do not have a root. In fact, it's not until the very, very end that we get a resolution to the perceived home base of the entire thing that has the root. We do get some hints, but they're still unresolved. Now, we can leave a chord unresolved. So, for example, if we're going to resolve in D flat major, we can withhold that resolution by using something other than D flat in the bass. If I place an F in the bass, which is just the third of the chord, it doesn't feel as resolved as if I simply just play D flat right there. That has something else going on that's like, oh, okay, we still need to work around before we can actually feel like this thing is complete. For 4.5 hours, that's what we do in this opera. That total lack of a satisfying resolution is literally the perfect tool to use if you are trying to depict the literal destruction of Earth. And that is what we do in the final scene of Melancholia. And this scene is equal parts terrifying and disturbing and sad and just like, whoa, it just makes you think, like, can you imagine if we ever find ourselves in this scenario? It's absolutely crazy, but the music here, the lack of resolution, the beautiful melodic lines, and the way the harmony twists around itself. I mean, it's just giving us this feeling of like, there's no outcome here. There's just no winning. It's the sense of despair, this hopelessness. And boy, is it depicted well. Obviously, wow, just wow. There we go with our lines. There's the chord. Wow. There's that movement again that we just talked about. That almost feels like a resolution, but there's no root in the bass, and it moves on to something else. More dissonance and minor chords and diminished chords and all kinds of things, and we still listen to the way this line just continues to develop. Oh, what a shot! Oh, man! Wow. Yeah, that's intense. Just the usage of this theme is unbelievable. What a choice. It is not until the very, very end, after 4.5 hours of absolutely no relief, harmonically speaking, and we just get this like constant build up and build up and build up, and you can hear, we're gonna hear major chords. We're gonna hear major chords that are now telling us this is probably in the key of B major, right? But we started here. How do you get B major out of this chord? Even when we get the first inkling of B major, we hear it with the third and the root. Check this out. There's a B major chord, but again, it's got the D sharp in the root. E, B. Now we're going somewhere else entirely. We still have not allowed this thing to settle. Now we're somewhere else. Totally different now. We're continuing to get these false resolutions in a bunch of different keys as we work through the ending of this entire 4.5-hour opera. Oof. But clearly we're building. The string line is continuing to work its way up and up and up and up, and now we're gonna build. What is that? Here we finally get a proper dominant chord, and then we're gonna get a resolution, but it's not. It goes to the 4 chord before finally giving the 1 chord with the root and the bass for E major, and then B major. 4.5 hours it took us to get to this point, but even still, now, are we done? Is that actually gonna be where we land? Oh, where are we now? E minor. Wow. And we utilized one of my favorite chords of all time, the minor 4 chord, to create this resolution. There's our resolution. We're still going back and forth between like 1 and 4, 5, 1, right? Beautiful. But there's still a but, because we're not done yet. There's our theme almost from the beginning, except we get it on this minor 4 chord, and we go, please, for the love of God, don't do this to me now. And there's our final chord of the 4.5-hour opera that you just endured without any resolution. It finally pays off in the end, and we get this beautiful B major. Was it the key the whole time? Almost definitely not, but it's the key we end in, and that is why this is one of the most impactful pieces ever written. And the dissonance and the lack of a home bass is part of what made it the perfect soundtrack for the literal end of the world. And of course, in that context, we don't get the final resolution. But luckily in the actual opera, we do. And it is beautiful, and it is incredible. I actually heard this for the first time as the soundtrack to Melancholia, and it was one of the reasons why I was like, what is this? Because it's one of the most unique soundtracks to a film I'd ever heard. And of course, that's because it's one of the most unique orchestral pieces ever written. I just wanted to share that with you guys today because I've been listening to it and I just am continuously blown away by it. But as always, let me know your thoughts on this piece in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.